Let's continue listening to the teaching of our mother, the Church, by attending closely to her lectionary that she's been presenting to us and reading it in the context of the liturgical movement that we're in, which is the beginning of Great Lent. So, what were we reading this last week from the Scriptures? No, not from the Gospel. Genesis. We're going to... Isaiah is read when? In the 6th hour? That's the assignment for the 6th hour? Yes. So, let's... The principle that we're proceeding from follows from this ancient understanding of the three churches, or the one church in her three dimensions, in which the visible and the heavenly are one piece with the invisible. There's the visible, then there's the invisible, which opens onto the heavenly. The visible, of course, is everything that you see. The invisible would be the church of the heart, or even the church of the temple of the body, whose sanctuary is the heart. And the heavenly church is what the church of the heart opens onto. So as I said, these three churches can be likened to a wheel in which you set the outer rim of the wheel moving, the hub moves. You touch the hub, start it moving, the rim moves. Which is to say that when we come into the visible church, when we come into it prayerfully, reverently, in the fear of God with faith and love, we're setting the whole wheel in motion. When we make the sign of the cross, we're entering into the mystical mystery of the cross, the invisible and the heavenly mystery of the cross. We're not just making the sign of the cross as an emblem or as a representation. We're participating in the full mystery of Christ. This leads to, and as well it proceeds from, an understanding of reality in which the beginning is not way back when, eons and eons ago, when there was the Big Bang. The beginning is actually the mystery of Christ's Sabbath rest in the tomb. That's the beginning. And from the beginning proceeds the creation. Stay-based time. So that when the Lord Jesus is incarnate, in the Revelations, he calls himself the beginning and the end. I am the first and the last. I am the Alpha and the Omega. So when he becomes incarnate, if you will, the beginning is with us. The beginning is here. The source of all things is here. And it follows from that everything that he did in the flesh was opening onto, if you will, the invisible and the heavenly. So with that very brief introduction, describing the principle that we're working with here as we prayerfully listen to the teaching of the Church as she gives it to us in her lectionary and the setting of the liturgical cycle of the Church, let's go to what we were reading this last week. And we can't go to all of it because there's a lot of it. So let's just go specifically to the book of Genesis and contemplate. Well, let's read Genesis in light of where we are liturgically. So let's set the liturgical setting. When we left Cheese Fair Sunday to enter into Great Lent, we read from Luke 23, the account of Joseph of Arimathea taking Christ's body down from the tree and laying it in a new tomb. Just as a parenthesis, I would suggest, it seems to me, that the theological meaning of the new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid before, is that this is a new kind of death. It's a death of God, for one thing, because Jesus is God. But also, it's the death of one who was absolutely righteous. A man who was absolutely righteous. And righteousness does not die. Wisdom of Solomon, righteousness is immortal. Death is the consequence of disobedience, the consequence of unrighteousness. So we have all died. We all die in unrighteousness, in the unrighteousness of our disobedience. But Christ died in the obedience of his righteousness. So it's a completely new kind of death. But in that, he has also died. So he has injected himself, if you will, into our death. He's infused our disobedience and our unrighteousness with his obedience and his righteousness. So if we can just get into his tomb, that's the goal. So we read on Thursday of Cheese Fair, we read, and the day was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was Epiphoskin. The Sabbath was dawning. It was beginning to grow light. So we read that coming into Great Lent. So what does that tell us? I mean, if we take that seriously, and if we take it theologically or mystically, that tells us what? Where are we now? Mystically, where are we these 6 weeks? Where are we in theological terms, in mystical terms, spiritual terms? Where are we? You want me to read it again? Yes, thank you. We're at the tomb. We're at the tomb. We're with the myrrh bearers, or actually we're not at the tomb, are we? Because we returned with the myrrh bearers. We returned. But the setting now of these 6 weeks of Great Lent is the tomb. And it's not so much that we're moving towards Christ's tomb. We're already there. You understand? From the lectionary, it has already brought us to the tomb. We've already witnessed his crucifixion, his trial, his crucifixion, and his burial. We've already witnessed it. And it's in the setting of that we enter Great Lent. So theologically, mystically, we are in the mystery of God's Sabbath rest. So that juxtaposition of the lectionary, showing us, bringing us to the Sabbath rest of God, the juxtaposition of that with the mundane, worldly fact of Great Lent, that it's 6 weeks long, it's putting the 6 weeks of Great Lent into the Sabbath rest of God. So the mystery of time is united into the mystery of God's Sabbath rest. So that even though we're proceeding through time now, there are these 6 weeks, we are in a timeless reality, a mystical, timeless reality. We are in the Sabbath rest. Time is standing still here in the darkness of the night of God's Sabbath rest, the darkness of the night, and yet the light is already beginning to shine. What light? So with that, any questions? Are you clear on that? Because this is the setting now in which we're going to go into Genesis and start reading Genesis and listening to what Moses is telling us in Genesis in the light or in the setting of this liturgical setting of the church. So everybody's clear on that. Okay, let's go. What's the first thing that we read then from Genesis? What do we do? Would it be helpful to... So this whole week we have been reading from Genesis 1:1 through we went all the way through to the fall. So that on Friday we read of the fall. Let's see, what was it in Genesis 3:20? That's the last verse that we read. Genesis 3:20. Does it stop when God says, to the dust you came, to the dust you shall return? Is that what it was?
No.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that is Friday.
3:20.
This reading is where they disobeyed
Mm-hmm.
and were sent out of the garden.
In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat thy bread until I return to the earth out of which thou wast taken. For earth thou art, and to earth thou shalt return. So that's where we ended with the first week of Great Lent. So we're looking at the first 3 chapters of Genesis. This is fun to do because the first 3 chapters of Genesis are relatively easy to read them in the light of the liturgical setting, the Lenten setting that we're now in. It's a bit more challenging with some of the other passages. So this will be fun for us to do. So let's go to Genesis 1:1, and what does it say? Does somebody read, or even just quote, because you know what Genesis 1:1 says.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Think about it. Where are we? Liturgically, mystically. Where are we? Again.
We're at the beginning of what?
No, okay, but I mean, I'm repeating myself. I'm asking the same question I asked before. Liturgically, theologically, mystically, where are we? Well, yes, we're at the mystery of the tomb. So now read that again. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Anything come to you as you read that and ponder it in the liturgical setting of Lent? We're at the tomb. In the beginning. What?
Is the creation issuing from the tomb?
There you go. There you go. What would we, now as we hear, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Where is God? Now, liturgically, where is he? He's in the tomb. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What's the beginning now? How do you see the beginning? No.
In the tomb.
In the tomb. The tomb is the beginning. In the beginning, in the tomb, God created the heavens and the earth. Luke 23, verse 53. It was the day of preparation. What day is it now? I mean, in terms of the week, what day is it? It's Friday. The evening before the Sabbath. So that's the morning of the Sabbath, which is the evening of Friday. So it's dark. So it was the evening, it was the day of preparation, of getting ready for the Sabbath. But already the Sabbath was beginning to dawn. Which Sabbath? When else do we hear about the Sabbath? Well, yeah. Yes, this is the mystical Sabbath, and it keeps going. The trope keeps going. I don't remember exactly what it says, but it mentions Moses, right? This is the mystical. This is the Sabbath, the mystical Sabbath that Moses, however it says it, that Moses was writing about. When was Moses writing about the Sabbath? At the creation, chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. So the Sabbath, this is the Sabbath, the rest of God in the tomb. And so the Sabbath that we're talking about is not just another Saturday. It's not another Saturday. And it's not the Sabbath of Genesis 2, 1 through 4. This is the Sabbath that Moses prefigured when he wrote about the Sabbath in Genesis. So that wasn't the beginning. That was a prophecy of the beginning, which is the tomb of God, the new tomb of God in his Sabbath rest. And it says the Sabbath was beginning to dawn. What happens on the first, what happens in the creation? Genesis chapter 1 that we read. The first thing that God makes. How does the creation get started? Light. And the light was beginning to dawn. So which light? I mean, what's this light all about? You know, I'm just repeating myself because I want to drive this home. I'm not going anywhere new, I'm not going into new territory. I want to drive this point home. What's the light doing? What's this light all about? What light is it? This is the uncreated light. So it's not that light in Genesis 1:3 or whatever it is it? That light too is a prefigurement, a prophecy of this light that is dawning. Now, you go back to Genesis 1 and following, and the light, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And you'll notice that that's the first thing God makes. You remember, the sun and the moon don't come into existence. He doesn't create them until the fourth day. So plants and herbs are already growing before he has created the sun and the moon. And you know that the plants can't grow without the sun, right? So, so then it raises the question, then what is this light that God brought into being? Well, it can't be, because this is the created light. The only begotten Son is the uncreated light of God. Well, what does the psalmist say in 119, 118, the Septuagint? What does he say about the law? You know, the commandments of God. They're a light unto my path. They're a light unto my path. That's just one reference. The light that God brings into being first could well be the law. The law. And the law is all about what? Or about who? What does the Lord say to his disciples as they're going up to Jerusalem? You know, behold, the Son of Man will be betrayed into the hands of man, into the hands of the rulers, and he will suffer and die, as it is written of him in what? In where? In the law and the prophets. You see. So the light is the law of God, Torah, but it is not the light. It too is a prophecy, a prefigurement of the light. And, so everything in Genesis is a prefigurement. It's a prophecy of the real deal, which happens in Christ, when he ascends the cross and is buried in his Sabbath rest. So with this, in the beginning, God that created the heavens and the earth. So in the tomb of the Lord's Sabbath rest, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what does it say in Genesis 1? It says God created the heavens and the earth. Then what does it say?
It was a outpour of the void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you. Can you say what he's saying there in several words? Can you say it in one word? The earth was what?
Dark. Void.
Yeah. I mean, those were all good words, but there's a specific.
Unformed.
Formless.
Okay. Well, now remember where we're standing. At the tomb. What did you say, Tonya? Empty. The earth was empty. The earth was the tomb. I mean, Christ is buried. Where is he? What is the tomb that he's buried in? Isn't it the earth? The earth was formless and without void. It was empty. So here, even here, Do you see? It's a prefigurement. It's a prophecy of the death of God, the Sabbath rest, dying a new kind of death. So new how it is so new. What is its character? The tomb can't hold him. It becomes empty. This is a death in which tombs are emptied. So to enter into Christ's tomb and to die so that we enter into Christ's tomb is to die this death that empties the tomb. I think that's kind of cool. Now, with this in mind, yeah, okay. I have a reference here in my notes I have to Wisdom of Solomon. You know, the muggles of the world contemplate the Christian faith. They make fun of it because they're thinking with their mind. They're not thinking with faith. I said muggles. 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 You've not read Harry Potter?
Oh, no.
Well, then you're not missing anything, so don't worry about it. It says in Wisdom of Solomon, seek not death in the error of your life, and pull not upon yourselves destruction with the works of your hands, for God did not make death. And the muggles will say, well, then why are we dead? You know, they just dismiss the Christian faith. What's all this talk about resurrection and death? Death and resurrection. For God did not make death, neither has he pleasure in the destruction of the living. For he created all things that they might have their being, and the generations of the world were full of health. The word actually in the Greek is the same word for salvation, or salvific. So he made the generations of the world for salvation. Salvation means health. It means freedom. It means to be delivered. So he made all things to be healthy and free. And there is no poison of destruction in them, nor the kingdom of death upon the earth. That's how God made the earth. For righteousness is immortal. But ungodly men with their works and words called it to themselves. For when they thought that they would have it as their friend, it consumed them to nothing, and they made a covenant with it because they are worthy to take part with it. They are worthy of death. Here it says in chapter 2, for God created man to be immortal. He made him to be an image of his own eternity. Nevertheless, through envy of the devil came death into the world, and they that are of his side do find it. But the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and there shall no torment touch them. In the sight of the unwise they seemed to die, and their departure is taken from misery, and their going from us to be utter destruction. But they are in peace. They are in the Sabbath rest of God. They are in the tomb of God. For though they be punished in the sight of men, yet is their hope full of immortality, full of the empty tomb. Now, with all of this, I'm just thinking that it would be fun to contemplate the beginning more deeply. So let's get it. Let's appreciate what we're seeing here. That as we're standing before the tomb of the Savior, as we're standing before the tomb of God, we're beholding the beginning. It says of the myrrh bearers as they watched him being buried, it says that they saw how, what does it say? And something like they were beholding, and the women, yes, they beheld the tomb. they beheld the tomb and how his body was laid. I think St. Luke could be telling us that they were pondering, they were meditating, they were contemplating the mystery of God, the Son incarnate, being buried in the tomb. And that's what we're doing now. We're pondering. We're pondering the mystery of God being buried and being laid in the tomb of his Sabbath rest. So let's get it through our heads. Let's really understand and appreciate that as we're standing before the tomb, we're standing before, this is the beginning. This is the beginning. This is the foundation of all things. Now, how many times does it say in the New Testament? How many times does it speak of the cross as being from the foundation of the world? I think St. Paul talks about it in one of his epistles, but perhaps the most explicit proof text here would be Revelations 13:8, which we looked at one summer, to note how the English translations shamelessly change the text so that it will read in a different way than it reads in the Greek. So it reads in English to support their own doctrine of predestination. And all those who dwell upon the earth will worship the Antichrist, the evil one. Each one whose name is not written in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the world. So here we have, and this is just one of several instances, references in the New Testament that present the theological understanding of Christ's death on the cross, his burial in the tomb, his death and his burial in the tomb as being from the foundation of the world. And so that would imply that the world has its foundation in the mystery of Christ's holy Pascha, his cross and his death. That's where the world begins. So trying to understand the Christian faith from the perspective of physics or science, something's got to give. I mean, either you're going to dismiss the Christian faith or you're going to dismiss science. If you dismiss science, of course, you're going to become a nut. I mean, it just leads to all kinds of problems. But what the church is telling us is that the essence of the world is not physics. It is the mystery of Christ. And if you want to understand how the world functions, why it is the way it is, in its deepest, most essential root, you need to enter into the mystery of Christ. This is the foundation of the world. So now you're not thinking of beginning in terms of a linear, movement of time. Now you're thinking of beginning. You're thinking of time itself as proceeding from this point, this timeless point, which is the Sabbath rest of God. Time proceeds from that. Everything proceeds from that. This is the beginning of everything. And so as we're standing before the tomb of the God, the dead God, we are standing before the mystery of creation, its foundation, its beginning. So understanding that, let's play a theological game. Maybe it's a game, maybe it's not. But I see three beginnings in Genesis as we read it in the light of the church's liturgical setting. I see three beginnings. And I want to see if we can find those three beginnings, and I want to see if they illumine at all for us the theological meaning of the immediate destination of Great Lent. So what is the immediate destination of Great Lent? In other words, where do we end when we come to the end of Great Lent? What?
Pascha.
No, not Pascha.
Yes.
Lazarus Saturday. That's the end of Great Lent. Now, what's the significance of Lazarus Saturday? I mean, what's going on with Lazarus? What about Lazarus? Well, come on.
Jesus.
He's dead. He's dead. He's dead, Jim. So we come to the tomb of Lazarus.
That reference I did get.
That was for you, Michael. Okay, so what is the meaning of Lazarus Saturday? What is the meaning of Lazarus' death and resurrection? We proclaim it in the trope.
It's really a precursor for.
Exactly, that's what we say in the trope. What is it? Thou didst, in raising Lazarus from the dead, thou dost proclaim thy universal passion before thy. Does it universal resurrection before thy passion? Yeah. So let's see. So that also will help us to understand the spiritual theological meaning of Lazarus Saturday. Its mystical meaning, not as a story out there, but as a spiritual, but as a story. A physical event in space-time that opens onto the invisible mystery of the heart. What is it? What is the reality that's in the heart that the event of Lazarus' resurrection from the dead is all about? So that's the goal of the game, to see if we can find out what that is. So to play the game and to get to that, I'm going to put this challenge in front of you. Let's see if we can find. I see three definitive beginnings in Genesis chapters 1 to 3. Now those, at least one of them, may be a bit tricky. So this is going to be a real challenge. But can you find those three beginnings? I mean, I think you know the chapters well enough that you can just do it without reading them. Let somebody give me the one beginning that comes to mind. A beginning. Okay, let's talk about let's talk that. Let's say that is the beginning of. Because the light isn't, I mean, I understand, I see what you're saying, Dan.
I guess, maybe just a shortcut. I'm thinking light, the creation of the world, and the creation of man.
Yeah, so there's the begin. Let's go with that, Jim. Dan, let's go with that, Jim. So there's the beginning that comes from the light, and by that we'll comprehend Genesis 1 to 3. That might put us into 4 beginnings. Okay? That might put us into 4 beginnings. So let's do another beginning. So I'll take you to Genesis chapter 1. Look, run in your head, scan through chapter 1, and see if you can find another definitive beginning. This one actually might be a bit tricky. What? Okay, we're staying with Genesis chapter 1. All right. Where does man come from in Genesis chapter 1? Where does man come from?
Dust of the ground.
No, not yet. Chapter 1. You're in chapter 2. Where does man come from?
Breath of God.
No, you're in chapter 2. Chapter 1. Okay, read Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, I think it is. What does it say?
And God said, let us make man in our image.
Where does man, okay, so where does man come? What is man's beginning there? Yeah, the image of God. So a second beginning, we'll say, is the image of God. And who is the image of God? Colossians 1:15. Christ is the invisible, is the icon, the image of the invisible God. So here's the beginning. Christ, the image of God. We come to being in him, not outside of him, but in him. Okay? So now let's go to chapter 2. Now, in chapter 2, where does man come from? The dust, or the earth. Now, God made everything good, right, and holy. So the earth that God fashions man from is good. Very good. So that's the third beginning. Now there's a fourth beginning. And this one might be hard to find. Okay, you're very close. She says disobedience. You're on the road. Where does the disobedience lead to? Where does it take us? You know, what happened? What does it happen? What was the last verse that we read this last week? Chapter 3, verse 20. Well, not yet. Not yet. As I said, this.
They're hiding from God.
Okay.
And then they
Keep going.
blame each other.
Okay.
And God gave them
Skins.
the skin. Okay.
Oh, you mean he's.
He's telling the serpent he'll be on.
And what would we say that is? That's a curse. He curses the serpent. What else does he curse?
And then the ground.
The ground. He curses the ground. Okay, now you're very close to this fourth beginning. So where does all of this take us? Where does it lead Adam and Eve? What does God say to them? I mean, yes, where does it lead them? It leads them outside the garden, but ultimately, where does it take them finally? How is this ground different from this ground? It's cursed. So I'm suggesting that a fourth beginning is the cursed earth. All right. Now, earth, okay, we got to bring this to close. It's like the tomb, is it not? Because you're buried in the ground. You're buried in the earth. So then, our immediate beginning now is the tomb, the cursed earth. From the earth you were taken. Which earth? Number 3 or number 4? Number 3. From the good earth you were taken. To the same ground you will return, but it's not quite the same because now it is cursed. Okay? So Lazarus Saturday. Oh no, let's back up now. When the Lord is buried in the tomb, another word for tomb would be he's buried in the earth. What is it? Psalm 70 something. Talks about my God, my Savior, who works salvation in the midst of the earth. So my God is being buried. When he's buried it's a new tomb, but it's also the same earth that's been cursed. And so when he's buried in the cursed tomb, what's going to happen to that curse? It's going to wash away. Okay? So, when we come to Lazarus Saturday, we are coming to Lazarus dead in the tomb. But if that is a reality, that opens onto the invisible reality of my heart. Who is buried in that tomb of Lazarus? Isn't it me? I'm buried in that tomb. The tomb is my heart. And that's our immediate destination here as we're standing in the Sabbath rest of God, mystically, in these weeks of Great Lent. How am I going to get into God's tomb? First, I got to get into my tomb. I got to get into Lazarus' tomb. How do I do that? I want to get into my tomb with, so that I'm uniting myself to Christ in the likeness of his death. In the likeness of his death. My death, then, it becomes like his death. How does my death become like his death? What do I have to do in order for my death to become like his?
Take up his cross.
Yes, exactly. I have to deny myself. I have to take up the cross and do the commandments as best I can. Practice righteousness as best I can. Of course, what I discover is that I can't.
Yeah.
Because I'm crippled, right? I'm crippled. But I'm going to take that cross. How do I take the cross now? How do I take that cross in a physical, concrete, real way? Not just theoretically, not just sentimentally, imaginary.
Well, I suppose one
In the
way
fast.
would be-
Oh, did I beat you to the punch? Sorry.
Yeah.
The fast. So through the fast, I'm laying hold of the cross. You know, the cross is, the fast is the flower of abstinence that grows from the tree. So the fast is rooted in the cross. That means that that means that the energy of the cross is working in the fast. So that when I take up the fast, I'm uniting myself to Christ. And then if I'm uniting myself to Christ, then it's his death that is working in me as I take up the fast. And so through the fast, I make my way to Lazarus' tomb, which is my heart, which is dead in its sins and trespasses. But now my death has become like Christ's death. It's not perfect like Christ because I'm sinful. But by means of the fast, I have performed a death that is like Christ's. And I have united myself to Christ in the likeness of his death by taking up my cross. So that's where we come on Lazarus Saturday. That's where we are on Lazarus Saturday. And what do we hear at the end? You know, what happens on Lazarus Saturday? When the Lord comes, what happens? Yeah, he's raised from the dead. Lazarus, come forth. Sally, come forth. David, come forth. So we come forth risen from the dead. Now where do we go? Now we're going to go into Holy Week. And we're going to go to the beginning. The beginning. We're going to go into the image of God in whom we came to be. We're going to go back to the earth, but we're going to go back to the earth in the image of God. And when we go back to the earth in the image of God in his Sabbath rest, we come into the light, the uncreated light. And we come into the new creation. So this is the synopsis, if you will. What I ask you to consider is how all of this is the lesson that the church is teaching us. I mean, I didn't come up with this. I would never have come up with this. Never. Except by pondering Christ's tomb and how he was laid, pondering that in the light of the church, in the light of the lectionary, the light of the liturgical, the light of the Lenten, the movement of the church's liturgical movement, and how it is that we went from here, Luke chapter 23, and Cheese Fair week, we went from there, then we went the next week during Lent, we went immediately to Genesis and the creation. Yes, we're reading from Proverbs and we're reading from Isaiah too. So now you can be reading Proverbs and Isaiah. You can be reading all of the prophecies now as we go through Lent. Read them in the light of Christ's tomb. It's like the prophecies are helping us to ponder the tomb of Christ and how he was laid. Because what does the Lord tell his disciples? The Son of Man goes to be betrayed as it was written of him, as the prophets, the law and the prophets foretold. When did the disciples finally get it? When did John and Peter, who was it? John that goes into the tomb in John's gospel. Remember, John and Peter run to the tomb. And Peter gets there first, and John comes up behind him, and John goes into the tomb. He's now in the empty tomb. He sees the linen cloths. He sees the headband over there. And what does it say? Suddenly he understood. Suddenly he believed. Now he believed. Now he understood what the Lord had been trying to tell them. So it's in the mystery of the tomb. That's when everything begins to fall into place. You know? So as we ponder the law and the prophets that we're reading, let's ponder them in the mystery and read them. See, and you know, We did it last week too when we did, what was it, Zechariah? We showed how when you read the prophecy of Zechariah that was assigned for us on Cheese Fair Friday, suddenly it reads completely different, but it's like it opens up, and it opens up when you read it in the light of Christ's tomb. It opens up, and you see things there. You begin to understand it, things that you didn't see before. So this is the challenge. Let's go through Great Lent now. And as you're reading daily from the prophecies that are assigned to us, read them as the church helping us to do this pondering of the tomb and how the Lord was laid in it. And seeing, because when you stand before the tomb of the Lord, you understand you are standing in the fulfillment of the prophecies. So if you want to understand what the prophecy is meaning, read it in the light of its fulfillment, which is Christ in the tomb, in his Sabbath rest. All right, enough for today.